Hi everyone, my name is Rhiannon from Blue Dog Board Games. Today we are so close to the end of the year. We are carrying on our solo blog series for discussing all the games that we have played in the month of November. So as some of you will know, and what I've discussed before in some of these videos, I have been attempting to play a game every single day of the year so far. Technically I have already reached it because I did start playing games every day, I think it was about October last year, but I sort of consciously decided to start continuing that pattern at the very beginning of the year. So we are now in December, filming this right now, and we have so far got it, so just less than a month left to go, so let's see if we can push through that final month. In this video today, I will be just discussing all the games that I have played in November and also just giving you my thoughts on some that I haven't yet discussed on the channel. And next month I will sort of do a bit of a similar one, so I will discuss any new games I haven't yet spoken about, but also we will be having a bit of a recap of the year and see what games I played the most, what are my biggest surprises of the year, and anything that I'm sort of anticipating in the year to come. So I'm just looking at my stats for November. November was a pretty good month gaming wise. I played 40 different times. That is a number, over 15 different games, and I spent 36 hours gaming. And of course, played a game every single day. Not necessarily all solo plays, however. I did only manage to play 10% of my collection this particular month, so that wasn't as high as some of my previous months, but can't have it always. So the first game that I actually played this month, I played it over 3 hours, and that is 9 different plays. I won't speak about because I believe that this is one I discussed in my previous month's video, and that is Isle of Trains All Aboard. That is a really great small box game and gorgeous components. Is a really fun one just to get out and have a good quick 20 minutes to half an hour playthrough of. Really been enjoying that one. But the one that we will go into first of all is the second on my list. This is a game that I have played over 8 different hours and 7 separate plays. This game is Sentinels of the Multiverse Definitive Edition. Now once again, I will just say that this is a copy that I have received through my association with Diary of a Lincoln Geek. This is my own personal copy to keep though, so I've got no sort of obligation to sort of have my views bought or anything like that, not that anyone can buy my point of view. There will be a written review of this one, and once that has been finalised and published, I will pop the link of that one down below. I anticipate this video may go up before that is live, so you may just have to be patient if you wanted to see that one. But thank you very much to Diary of a Lincoln Geek for giving me the opportunity to play this game and give this one a review. So if you don't know Sentinels of the Multiverse, this is a comic book style card battler system. So you're taking control of some heroes and you are going up against a villain to take them down, essentially. This is quite an old game. The definitive edition has only been released in the last year or two. It is very new, so this is just sort of pulling together all of the bits and pieces from over the years, from what I believe, and just bringing it all in a much more streamlined manner. I haven't played any of the older versions, so I can't really give you a summary of how they all differ. I just know that essentially some of the heroes, or if not all the heroes and villains that you see in this edition, have been sort of seen before, and it's just sort of pulling elements of the older games into this new format. So I played this one entirely solo. I am planning to play this one multiplayer, but I haven't yet got round to it. I will probably lead what I'm going to say here is that I don't think this is a bad game. I just think this is a bad game for me and not a great solo experience. One of the main reasons of that is when you are playing solo, you have to play a minimum of 3 heroes, and each of these heroes has a very big deck of cards that has quite intricate, not rules, that all the rules of this game are very simple, but intricacies of how they can actually get their engine building. Therefore, that means that I was having to learn 3 separate characters as we go, as well as learn the game on top of that, as well as learn how the villain that you're going up against is working, as well as learn what the environment is doing around you. So I'll go into a bit of a summary of how the game actually works. In this game, as I said, you are taking control of some heroes and you have a villain that you choose to go up against, and whoever defeats the other one first wins the game. On your turn, you are going through a number of phases, so you are activating anything in your tableau that has a start phase ability that may be like do a certain number of damage to some targets, or heal ability, or something quite simple is literally like a one-liner type thing of heal one target, 1 health point, something like that. You then go into your phase where you are playing a card from your hand, and you start the game with only 4 cards in your hand, and you may gain more cards as you go through the game. So these can be a number of different powers, so it may be like an item card that you play in your tableau and it has an ongoing ability. It may be like a one-shot card, so it does like damage or a certain big impact action. You may draw a load of cards into your hand at that point. You may have the ability to play an additional card, things like that. You then have a power phase where you are powering up something in your tableau. So on each of your hero cards you have a power ability, and that's usually something like, again, do some damage, or you may be able to buff up another hero or yourself. There are other cards that you can play as well throughout the game which may enhance the number of powers that you have, but in the power phase you're only activating one of these. And finally, the end phase is where you are going to be activating any end phase abilities, and so you're all following through that format, one after the other, and then the environment takes their turn. The environment can sort of interact with both the villain and the heroes and may help you, it may help the villain. You just need to be sort of aware of what they're doing, but basically you're just drawing a card and playing it and resolving the effects. And the villains, they actually start the game as well, so the villain turn goes first and then you go for all your heroes. The villain practically plays the same way as the heroes, where they activate their start phase abilities, they play a card from their deck, and then any end phase abilities as well. But they sometimes have little niches, so they may be unable to take damage until something is off the actual tableau. They may sort of redirect damage and things like that, so you just need to be careful of their little like phrases to see what they're actually doing on their turn. I sort of went into this game quite excited. I'd heard of Sentinels of the Multiverse before. I didn't know much about it because I'm not really a comic book person. It's not really something I tend to be interested in. I'm not interested in Marvel or superheroes or anything like that. But you hear the name Sentinels of the Multiverse and yeah, that's an older game, but you still hear of it nowadays, so it's obviously well loved and pretty good. It's well rated. And so I was quite excited to get this one going and see what I thought of it. But I just found it so incredibly overwhelming not to learn. The rules are very simple. You can get up and running in about 5 minutes essentially. It's learning all the niches of how to actually implement your hero's powers really effectively. What I was finding was that I was employing a random selection of heroes. I didn't really know how they played, whether they were sort of a backup type hero, whether they buffed up everyone else, whether they did the attacking themselves. There is a lore book in the definitive edition as well that does sort of give you a flavour of how they work, but honestly I felt like I needed a beginner setup. So you do get a beginner villain to go up against, but I needed some help with choosing which heroes to go against, because what I found on most of these plays was that I would get about 50 minutes into the game and then 2 of my heroes had already died within the first 15 minutes, and I was just going back and forth between my one standing hero left that happened to be the one that was that had much more health points, that was a beefier character that was able to do just simple damage as you play cards and do a damage to a target, whereas my other ones were much more backup heroes where they needed a really thorough understanding of their deck to know which cards you needed to try and find, cycle through that deck to find how you can even implement damage, because a lot of them I couldn't do any damage at all, and I was at a loss of how to actually get them to work, because not only is it difficult to find those cards in the first place, but I didn't find that I was cycling through my deck very far either, so quite often I just didn't see 90% of the deck of cards because they died before I got there, and I wasn't able to draw more cards because my hand size was so small. That of course then meant that I had only been playing that particular character for maybe 10-20 minutes, and so I wasn't really learning them either. I really feel like this sort of lends itself as a lifestyle game, and I absolutely was not prepared for that, and I didn't really, from just looking at the setup and everything, I didn't really consider that to be even a possibility for this sort of game, and I'm really I'm sort of left quite confused as to my thoughts to it, because it is well loved and a lot of people really, really enjoy this game and it's well rated, and I'm just left wondering what I'm missing. I don't think I'm playing it incorrectly, because I have watched a couple of playthroughs, and from what I can see, I think I'm playing it right. I'm missing something, and I think the thing I'm missing is that that standard knowledge of all of these characters, that thorough understanding of each of the cards and how they can implement their best strengths. But also I think I'm perhaps missing the motivation to sort of see the game through to the best of my ability, because it actually played quite long. Handling all three heroes is quite admin heavy, and then some of the villains that I was going up against were very challenging, and so essentially it really turned me off the game. Some of them weren't, some of them were much more approachable, but there was another villain as well that just played card after card after card. So you draw a card, it would say this summons a new card of that type from the deck, play another card from that deck, that summons another card from the deck, play another card, and it was just that, one after the other after the other after the other. I was just like, my brain had just switched off by that point. I was like, I'm not into this anymore. I don't want to continue. This isn't fun. So, you know, my overall solo thoughts were not particularly positive. I feel like if you played in multiplayer, at least you can really get to know your particular hero. But also you can share out that admin a little bit. So somebody could be running the villain's turn, and then the next person could be running it the next turn after that. And somebody else could be controlling the environment's turn. And so I think that would not only make the game a lot quicker, it would just allow you to sort of really get invested in your particular character. So I think that's maybe where it would shine a lot more. I do realise that a lot of what I've said is very negative, and I just want to make it clear that I don't think that this is a bad game, and there are certainly elements that I did enjoy. I do think that the heroes are on the whole quite interesting to play. There are some characters that allow you to sort of try and gain as many cards into your hand as possible, and then you can activate a card in the start phase of your next turn, and the number of cards that you discard from your hand deals that amount of damage to one target, or you may be able to deal a set amount of damage to the number of targets according to the number of cards you discarded from your hand. So things like that, you do have to be quite forward in your planning, and I really appreciate the sort of depth that these have. It's just learning to implement them and multi-handing it in that ability. It just doesn't meld well for me. The overall aesthetic of this game though is very fun. The lore book, as I said, it does have a lot of character sort of built in, so it gives you like a biography of each of the heroes, a bit of background on each of the villains as well, and even all the environments sort of brings that world to life a lot more. The artwork as well is really cool because it sort of tells you like a little snippet of text in the issue that the comic book was designed from. I didn't realise until a few games that I played that this actually isn't based on real comics. This is a fictional comic book series and fictional comic book company that these characters reside in. So I actually thought it was a real comic book series, but it is not. But yes, you have all the artwork that looks really, really comic book-esque. This aesthetic is really, really cool. So overall, it does look very good on the table. It's just not necessarily a game for me. I will just quickly say my biggest gripe of the game as well. Initially, when I was reading through the rulebook, I was quite interested because there are a good number of types of damage that you could do. So usually you could do like, I don't know, ranged and melee damage, for example. But this one had like melee, all the elemental damages, you've got toxic, you've got psychic damage, you've got thermal damage, you've got everything. And I was like, this is going to be really cool then. I mean, you're going to have to really sit down and think about maybe how can I weaken that enemy to this type of damage, because I know that my character is really, really good at implementing that damage, so I could really get that running and just like weaken them down and then do this sort of damage and then maybe bounce off another hero later down the line. But ultimately, I didn't really see that come into play at all. there are some abilities that allow you to really utilize the type of damage you are able to deal, but that is extremely few and far between. In all 7 plays that I have done, I have seen something that allows me to do that once, and I was able to implement it once. So it was one round that a villain was immune to a certain type of damage that I dealt to it that round. So I was like, okay, it's immune to fire damage this round, but all of the other damage is absolutely fine. So it didn't really change the game in any which way. So overall, I was actually really quite disappointed with that. I mean, don't get me wrong, it would really add an awful lot of admin on top of that. I think that could be quite easily offset though by the use of tokens. So I don't know, you can have tokens that you put on the enemy which says immune to lightning damage this turn, immune to melee damage this turn, and then just removes them when at the end of the turn. But yeah, I just thought that was a really, really cool idea, and it just didn't really feel like it followed through into the gameplay. So that was a little disappointing in my opinion. Again, I'm probably awful at this game. I mean, I died quite a lot, almost every time. So I would anticipate that it is a me problem, but as somebody who is a seasoned board game player, not this sort of board game maybe, but I just feel like it should have been a lot more approachable, especially for a definitive edition, where I think that a lot of people, if they're coming into it nowadays, would gravitate towards that newer, streamlined edition. And I just think it's just not as accessible as it should be. So anyway, I will leave that one there. We're going to move on to the next game. The next game is one that I have a playthrough of, so if you did want to see my full thoughts on this one, I will pop the link in the description down below and you can have a look at that one. This one is a Uwe Rosenberg game, Hallertau. I played this one over 7 hours and I played this one 6 different times. I did play this one 2-player as well. I absolutely love Hallertau. Solo Hallertau is just a really, really great experience. I absolutely love the way all the cards play in this game, because these can be played at any particular time on your turn, or on another player's turn, or in the middle of an action. It can be played at any time, and that is so fresh and unique and really opens up gameplay possibilities that no other game really does. If you don't know Hallertau, Hallertau is a game where you are basically hop farming, but that is not really this sort of crux of the game. Instead of sort of focusing on the crops part of it, you are trying to get resources, which happen to be the crops as well as animal products, to try and push your community centre along. And the further along this board that you push your community centre is the more progress that your community is gaining and the more points you're going to earn at the end of the game. This does have all of your typical worker placement elements, but it feels a little less competitive in my opinion, because there are 3 different worker placement spots at each of the options, bar the cards from memory. So there's only 2 worker placement slots at those areas, and it becomes a very interesting puzzle as the game progresses, because there's so many spots, you can probably still go to where you want to, but the cost at which it costs you to go there increases. So there's a 1 worker spot, there's a 2 worker spot and a 3 worker spot. And so sometimes you have to weigh up whether you really do actually want to go to that space and spend all 3 workers, and your workers are so valuable, or whether it's better off spending those workers elsewhere. It just feels a lot more open and a lot more friendly and approachable than some of Uwe's other titles in that regard. It feels much less competitive. There's no feeding people as well. You just have to be aware of trying to push buildings along to allow your community centre to progress as much as possible, and so that's where the resource management comes into it rather than the feeding. But ultimately there's no punishment if you don't manage to push your community centre or buildings along. So again, that just feels a little bit more friendly as well. I absolutely love Hallertau and I think it's a really, really great time. As I said, I think the card play for this one really just elevates this to a really, really fun and unique experience. It just feels a lot more fresh and quite a lot different to some of his other games. So that's Hallertau. Once again, I have discussed this one fully on my playthrough, so if you were interested in knowing that one in a little bit more depth, that one's in the description. So the next game on my list is one that was a little bit of a pushover from Halloween. I wanted to play it in October because it is a very, very thematic, creepy game. I didn't get a chance to do it, so I played it this month. I actually played it I've only just packed it up, so it's stretching into December as well. But I played this one 5 hours in November over 3 different plays, so it is a long game. It is an incredibly long game. This one is called Lobotomy, which you can actually see, where is it? There we go, Lobotomy is there. So Lobotomy is a dice chucking game, I believe, and I've never played Zombicide, but I have heard people describe it as and the next progression of a Zombicide game. I don't know how true that is, but I believe there's a lot of like similar elements here. Lobotomy is a game where you are set in a mental asylum, so automatically this is not going to be a game for everyone. Its artwork and themes are very vibrant and thematic, so it is a very unpleasant game to look at in terms of its gruesomeness. It also deals with mental illnesses that I personally believe that they are dealt with in as sensitive as possible way. They don't sort of make light of any of them as possible, but you do need to be aware that the mental illnesses are being used as powers. So when you are choosing a character, you take power cards from your mental illnesses that your character suffers from. So for example, they may have anxiety and schizophrenia. You take a schizophrenia and anxiety card, and they give you additional options on your turn, which allow you to do actions like attack actions, defense actions, things like that. So definitely have a look into this game a little bit more before you do purchase it if you are interested, just to make sure that the theme will be okay for you. So as I was saying, the theme of this one is you are taking control of a minimum of 3 characters. Once again, you need to multi-hand this one solo. You are in a mental asylum and your mental stability is breaking down, and you are visualizing. It's a bit of a sucker punch moment where you are visualizing everything as an alternate reality. All of the other people around you are turning into like monsters and things to attack. They're coming for you, and a lot of unpleasant events are happening that you need to roll die, attack, and ultimately complete the scenario goal. There are a lot of different scenarios in this game. There are, as part of the Kickstarter, I believe there are quite a few like add-ons as well, so I don't have all of the content. I haven't even played through all the content that I own. There is an awful lot there. So all of the scenarios actually play quite different as well. So there is one there, I didn't actually play it this time around, I played it a year or 2 ago, but there is a horrible and really creepy looking clown, a bit like Pennywise, that's going around, and you have to go and collect his balloons, I believe, and the balloons are like randomized in different areas of the board. I think you then have to like defeat him, something like that. There's another one where you have to take control of this Frankenstein's monster and use him to deal damage to other monsters whilst trying to avoid him. There's a lot of different scenarios, and they do actually feel quite unique, and they're quite exciting to sort of play through because they do ultimately change the game up in a decent way. On your turn, you are controlling a character and you have different abilities to use. So as usual, you can like move with action points, you can unlock doors, investigate items that you find, search through drawers, you can attack, you can defend, you can activate utility skills, and that may do different things like buff you up in some way, heal other people. And when you are clashing with monsters, you are rolling die, activating really superpowers, so you can roll a lot of die in this game. There was one turn that I had recently where I was rolling 20 different die, so if you want to roll dice, this is a good one for that. There's a lot of different abilities that the enemies have as well, so there's a whole list of like keywords, so some of them have like precision attacks, critical skills, where you're ignoring like defense on some like targets. You have fire attacks, which ignore all the defense. You have unholy creatures, you have ethereal creatures that may move through walls and things like that. There is a lot going on here, and it creates for a very, very atmospheric game. You also have a warden that acts as a timer. So he's like in a corner of the map. You have 4 segments around this central area that your characters start in. They're little isolated areas. And the warden is ticking up one space at a time, and you basically lose the game if he gets the last space and wants to proceed onwards. The idea is that you can play up to 4 different scenarios back to back. The easy mode this game is so hard. I am atrocious at it. I did manage to squeeze a win or two this time round, but I do have a feeling I may have missed a rule or two somewhere. But anyway, it's designed that you can play up to 4 back-to-back. So if you play one scenario only, and say you're going to play one only, you lose the game if the warden then proceeds to the second section of the map. That is meant to be easy mode. You can then choose to do 2, which increases the difficulty all the way up to 4. I can't imagine trying to play 4 scenarios back to back. In terms of time, this game is meant to take around about 40 minutes, I believe it is, for one scenario. It can take me about 2 hours to play through one scenario, so playing 4 scenarios back to back would be an all-day job. And I think you would have probably had enough by then. So their time estimations are completely off, I personally feel, in this game, and that's usually controlling 3 or 4 characters. Although this game is a lot of fun and is very thematic and very aesthetic and the setup, there are a lot of problems with it, and I think that it's important to let people know that going in, because it's not a very streamlined and polished experience. The rulebook is one of the worst that I have seen. It's unfinished essentially, so you do have sort of sections that don't make sense. There's like sentences that aren't finished, there's sections that are repeated because it's like obviously in the editing process been sort of copy and pasted to the other page to sort of fit it in, and they haven't sort of seen that's repeated the information or cut it off somewhere else. It's also just not sort of formatted in a great way, so it's very difficult to use as like a reference. There's no player aids, and this game it's essential to have player aids. There's a lot of little rules that you need to remember. I've printed some off from Board Game Geek to allow me to play this game a lot more seamlessly, and it's fine once you've got those in place, but it was needed in the game. You also have discrepancies on the setup, so there's not actually some of the printing on the boards. It's difficult to sort of see where you're meant to place bodies to search, as well as like cabinets. It's very unclear about where they're meant to be in the setup, and the rulebook doesn't actually tell you really like what's going on in that regard. It's quite difficult to follow. None of these are necessarily game breaking, but you do need to just be aware of that going in, and have a look on Board Game Geek if you want, because there are revised rule books and revised scenario books for this. I honestly haven't found them to be much better. And quite honestly, I just house rule some of these things. If I don't know where something is, it doesn't matter, I'm just going to put it in the easiest place for me to potentially get it, because this game is hard enough as it is without the setup being even more punishing. On top of that, this game does lack a lot of clarity in some of the scenarios. The scenarios, unfortunately, are printed in the back of the rulebook, and because this game is so big and complex and there's a lot going on, you needed this to be separate from the rulebook, because you're constantly flicking back and forth between the scenario rules and the rules in the main game. So that is another real frustration. But if you do have a player aid, that does definitely help. And some of the rules in the scenarios just are unclear, so sometimes you're just not quite sure. There was one, for example, I played the scenario, I think it's called I don't know if it was Frankenstein's Tower, or I was basically trying to control the Frankenstein's monster to deal damage to other characters, or not other characters, other monsters on the board. And the wording was that in order to take control of the monster, you needed to be 2 spaces away from it. Then I was just thinking, I'm not sure if it actually means that you need to be exactly 2 spaces away or within 2 spaces of it. And the wording of it literally says 2 spaces, and I was just like, it just needed just that little bit more clarity in some of these situations, just to make you feel confident that you are playing it correctly. But saying that, a lot of these things can be house ruled, and the overall aesthetic is what drew me to this one initially. It looks so good on the table. You've got some really, really good minis. Some of them aren't, because they are ones that you sort of had stuck in the base, so some of them are a little bit lopsided, but most of them are very good. They are so creepy looking. They're really, really horrible if you look at the small details. So they look really, really great. And the board is huge. You have 4 different segments set up. You've got a lot of variety in your segments as well, so they're all double-sided with different artwork on them. Some of them have like, you know, blood scrawls across them saying help me and things like that. It's really creepy, really aesthetic. The characters as well are all like caricatures of other characters that you may know. So there's like Grandma Bates, which I believe is a bit of a twist on Psycho and the Bates Motel. You've also got one which is modelled after H.P. Lovecraft. He's called like Philip Howard or something like that. They've swapped the initials around. And all of these characters sort of, oh, you've also got Helena Swan, or Helena Swan, which is meant to be Bella Swan. So she is known to think herself as a vampire and has been known to participate in cannibalism, according to their little bios. So you're taking all of these little caricatures that you may know, and their powers are sort of associated with that sort of theme as well. And they do have additional like cards with extra powers that you can draw as well. So overall, it just is a really fun game to sort of get into and really get involved in, because it really sort of brings that real creepiness to life. Although you do have to triple hand this one at a minimum, they do sort of have ways to offset that difficulty with lower player counts. So you do have like little caveats in your scenario. So it says with 3 players you have this benefit, or ignore the spawning of this monster. Or it just may give you like additional things to do on your turn, or things to ignore to just help you on your way a little bit. I don't find it too overwhelming to play these characters either. In Sentinels on the Multiverse, I found it very difficult to actually keep running all 3 characters back to back. But in this one, you are sort of, you don't need to sort of intricately learn the character. You've got maybe up to 4 skills that you're using, and you've also got a weapon in your hands as well. And so everything that you're doing is just sort of focused on those smaller abilities, and you can really sort of like coordinate with the rest of your team as to where they're all standing, what they're going to be doing, whether they're going to buff you up, and it all integrates a lot more smoothly for me, so I don't find it too much. I usually play 4-handed. I feel like 4 is a really nice player count for this game. So that's Lobotomy. Lobotomy is a really great Halloween game. You just need to sort of be aware going into it that you will need to definitely house rule some bits, and maybe just clarify some rules if you're playing it with other people as to how you want to play. There is a lot of variety here, a lot of replayability, and it's a really good time. I will say that there is a second Lobotomy game. I think it's called Lobotomy 2 Manhunt or something like that. I have not played that one. They are not compatible with each other from what I understand. And when I was purchasing this one, I didn't know whether to actually back the one on Kickstarter or go for this one. I went for the original in the end because I prefer the aesthetics a lot more. The second one has a lot more cartoony feel. So I do wonder whether they have pulled a lot of the ideas through to the second game, but have just streamlined all of those issues out a little bit. So maybe have a look into that one if you are interested in the game and are not too keen on house ruling. So that is Lobotomy. A really great game, but definitely not for everyone, I will say. The next game on my list is Grand Austria Hotel, which I have spoken about before. I have very recently put a playthrough out of that one, so I will link that one down below if you wanted to know my full in-depth thoughts on that one. That one I played 3 times over 3 hours, so playtime of about an hour. Really wonderful game. I absolutely love it. And the next game on my list is a new one to me. I'm smiling already because this honestly has been one of my greatest gaming experiences of the year so far, and I can't even really tell you why, but I am loving it so far. It's still on the table at the moment, so I'm still learning it and really getting into it, but I have played it enough at this point to talk about it in detail. This one is Stardew Valley, the board game. I have played this one twice in November over 2 hours, so roughly about an hour for a game. My first game took an hour and 20 minutes, and that was a learning game. I've played this one 2-player since as well, and this one just took about an hour and 45 minutes, so definitely takes at least an hour if you are more streamlined in your game and you know what you're doing, but can definitely push over into the hour and a half mark a little bit if you need a bit more time. So I will start by saying that I am a huge Stardew Valley video game fan, so I automatically thought I was going to really enjoy this game. I don't know for certain whether everyone would also have that same love for this game if they didn't love the franchise and didn't have that knowledge of the of the video game. I can't have that perspective. I don't know that perspective. My husband has played Stardew Valley a little bit, doesn't have the in-depth like player hours that I have in the game, so is much less detached from the game. Still really enjoyed the game, so I definitely think it's a solid game. I just don't know whether my love of the overall series or the overall theme has really elevated this one for me. Stardew Valley is a cooperative experience where you are trying to satisfy Grandpa's goals. You have 4 goals to complete by the end of the game, as well as reveal and complete all of the bundles in the community centre. On your turn, you are drawing a season card, which will allow you to do various different things. So it may allow you to enhance the quality of one of your crops that you have built, or planted, not built. A crow may come and take some of your crops. You may be able to sell resources. A Joja tile may come out and put like a permit in place on the board somewhere, which means that you either have to try and get rid of that at some point, or you are being penalised in some way at going to a particular action spot. So there are lots of different things that may be going on in that season phase. You may be drawing events as well. There's also cards which have the like seasonal events that you'll see in the video game. So you've got your luau, you've got your like Halloween festival, you've got your winter festival and things like that are coming out. You then proceed to your planning phase, and this is where players can choose where they want to start their turn on the map. And on your turn you are going to be doing either 1 action, 1 movement, 1 action, or you can just stay in the place and do 2 actions. In this game you are trying to, as I said, complete these goals, and they may range between like building buildings. Per player you may need to catch a legendary fish, you may to reach the bottom of the mines, you may need to gain certain amounts of money per player, or you may need to like get a certain number of resources, so like quality resources from your animals, or gain that number of animals. There's so much theme brought in from the video game. It's really quite impressive. When you are moving from spot to spot, you are able to forage neighbouring areas as well, and then keep them in your inventory. So, and then when you go to make friends with people, you can go to the like community centre area, choose to make a friend, and you draw one of the villager cards, and you can choose whether to gift them something, and they will give you hearts back, which you can then spend to reveal bundles in the community centre at a later date. Or you can just discard them if you don't have anything or you don't want them as a friend. There are some dice that you need to be rolling in this game. So when you are fishing, you are rolling die and spending the symbols on certain fish that are available in the spot you are fishing in. So you can only catch ocean fish at the ocean, for example. You're also rolling die in the mines and rolling only 2. And it will determine where on the grid you can resolve. So for example, there may be, I think it's like a 3x3 grid or something like that, and according to your symbol there and symbol down here, you can choose whether you are resolving, you gain a stone, or you gain an ore, or you gain a geode, or you actually encounter a monster and resolving that. There's also events in this game, so you may see events in the mine, so you may encounter the dwarf and things like that. And the events that are seen otherwise in the game are very thematic and take a lot of ideas from the video game. Overall, this is just a very, you can absolutely just feel the same feelings that you feel when you're playing the video game here. I saw so many elements being brought in from this game, and it made me so happy to play. I had the soundtrack on in the background, and this is just an overall really feel-good game. Don't get me wrong, it's absolutely not perfect because there's a good amount of luck involved. So when those crows come out, they're going to take your crops, and that could be quite detrimental if you're needing money. There's dice rolling in this game, so you could be rolling a lot of die and not catching any of those fish that you really need. There was one particular card that I found very frustrating actually, where I was a round or 2 from the end of the game. I had almost completed everything and I was about to win. And then I drew a card which said I needed to discard one of Grandpa's goals and draw a new one. So everything that I'd been building up throughout the game, that last one was lost, and I had to now try and get that one in the last round or 2. Luckily it was a good one, so I managed to do it, but that can be very frustrating if you draw that in the last round of the game and you lose because of that. On top of that as well, there isn't too much strategic depth here. The only things that you're sort of really considering are whether to what upgrades you're trying to get, because they buff up all your abilities. You can take a profession, so you can either be a fisherman, a farmer, a miner, or a forager. So you get profession upgrades which enhance these abilities and allow you to do certain things. So if you're the fisherman, the more you upgrade your fishing rod, you can re-roll some of these die, which help to offset that luck. But other than that, there's not too much strategic depth here. Especially when you're playing multiplayer, you are sort of thinking about who's going where in the turn order. So just because I'm going here first and catching the fish, you have an action that you can do back at your farmhouse at the end of the turn, but because you resolve that first, because you're the first player, that means that the second person won't be able to will be able to benefit from that. And you need to think about who's going where and in what order you're resolving, because the first player marker doesn't automatically switch. You have to wait for that to activate in the game. But I don't really mind that at all. This game is just pulling some really cozy, wholesome elements from the video game and really just makes this into a really lovely cooperative experience. I had such a blast with it. I will say that the component quality of this is not as good as some other games of its price point, especially the cardboard tokens. I had some trouble trying to get them out, and I did damage a few of them, not to the extent that I felt like I needed to get replacements, but it was definitely disappointing when you do pay that amount for a game. And I want to keep my games as nice as possible, and unfortunately there are some rips on them. Some of them as well were actually printed backwards. Not that it matters, because these ones were stored in like a token tray, so you only see them maybe once in every 5 games when you gain that particular item. But otherwise they should have been printed on the opposite side of the cardboard. So from a component point of view, it's slightly off the mark when you compare it to other games of similar price points, but you can't have it all. Overall, I just thought that this one was a real good time and one of my favourite memories of gaming this year when I was playing this one with the soundtrack in the background. The next game on my list is another new entry. This is another new addition to my collection. This game is called Turing Machine, and this is one that I've created a new, on top of my 365 days of gaming challenge this year, I've now got a second challenge that I'm trying to do for the month of December. I'm trying to do an Advent Turing Machine challenge, so every day in December, I may try and stretch it to the 31st of December as well. But up until Christmas, I want to be doing the daily challenge of Turing Machine and making sure I do that every day. So that's been so much fun so far. But in November, I played Turing Machine only twice, over 2 hours. I did play that 2-player as well, so did a few problems back to back, because each problem only lasts between maybe 10 minutes to 20 minutes according to the difficulty. Turing Machine is an incredibly clever little game where you are trying to crack the code of this machine. So you've got 3 different numbers. They may be between 1 and 5 value, and they're associated with a symbol, and you have different criteria around this machine which allows you to test your particular code against. So for example, it may say the sum of all of these numbers is odd, and you are creating a code like 111. You then layer up this particular these cardboard cutouts to create like little holes so you can actually view an answer. Take the answer card into your hand, lay your cardboard cutouts over the top, and it will give you a tick or a cross according to whether the final code matches that criteria in your code. So if the final code was indeed the sum of all of those numbers was odd, and I chose a code of 111 to check, which is a total of 3 odd, it will say tick yes. So you know that the sum of everything in the final code is going to be odd, but the numbers aren't necessarily 111. On your turn, you have up to 3 of these criteria to check against, and then you go into the next round and you can choose a new code to test, and you are trying to beat the machine in the solo mode as to how many turns that you can solve this puzzle in. I'm absolutely blown away by how clever this is. I can't even begin to sort of decipher how this game was designed. I believe it's based on the idea of the Turing Machine, which is like a computer type thing that was designed years ago. I don't even know the first thing about any of that sort of thing. It blows my mind as to how clever these people are. It is so cool. And if you like logic puzzles like Sudoku or like anything of that sort of criteria, you will probably really like this game. It was very funny when I was trying to learn it as well, because it took me about 10 minutes to read through the rule book. And I called my husband down from upstairs saying, yeah, I've read the rules, like let's give it a spin. And we sort of sat down together. I spent 2 minutes saying, yeah, so we choose a code and we test these 3 things. And then we just sat there, we were like, so how does it actually work? Like, how do we start? Like, what does that mean? I'm testing this thing and it's giving me a tick. What does that mean? But once your brain twigs like, oh, okay, so that means that's true, but not necessarily these numbers. And it makes your brain work in a way that it doesn't normally work in an everyday situation. So it's a real mental workout without being too challenging. The replayability of this one is off the scale as well, because you only have, I think it's 20-ish puzzles in the box that you get, but there is a website that you can go on, Turing.info I believe it is, and as long as you've got the components, there's an infinite number, millions and millions of problems to solve. They do a daily challenge, which is the one that I'm trying to do every day in December, and you can make the problems more difficult as well with different modes. There's so much here, and being a game that's taking up little play space, as well as one that only takes maybe about 20 minutes per problem, it's a really approachable one to take like traveling and just to sort of fill in a very small section of time. Really, really impressive game, and I'm so glad that I did pick it up, because it was one that I'd had my eye on for a long time and wasn't sure whether I should bite the bullet. Really, really glad I did, because it is a really good time so far. So that is Turing Machine. I will sort of update you in the next vlog as to how the Advent Challenge went and whether I managed to complete it every single day. But really enjoying that one so far. It's a really, really good time. The next game on my list is Raiders of the North Sea. I played that one for an hour. Only once. That was a 2-player playthrough. I do actually have a playthrough of that one. That was very early on in my filming. So I think I filmed this one the opposite way around, which in hindsight was an awful idea. So I will link that one down below if you were interested in seeing that one, but hopefully the filming quality has improved a little since then. The next game was Dinosaur Island Roll and Write. Absolutely love that as a roll and write game. It's a really much more meatier roll and write game than you would usually see. That was a 2-player playthrough, however, but a real good time. I love that game so much. And I have a playthrough of that one as well, so again, have a look in the description if you want to see my thoughts. So I actually had a trip to a board game cafe in November with my husband, and we played 3 different games there. So none of these were solo plays, but I will just very briefly say which ones we played and what we thought about them. We played Dominion. I wanted to play Dominion for a very, very long time. This is, you know, the original deck building type game, and so I was very intrigued as to how, because I played a few deck builders since, how that genre has sort of evolved, and if Dominion still sort of feels good enough to be a game that's played nowadays. It was really fun. I do feel like it's a game that does need multiple players to really sort of get used to it. We tried to play with just the base game, and I believe in the back of the rulebook it sort of tells you some like cards to like deal out, because you've got so many different choices to go with in the market like area, which ones to go for your first game. So I feel like this one would have benefited with a lot more plays to really get your strategy in, as per usual in these games. But it was a really, really fun one, and I would be definitely interested to play it a little bit more and explore that one in a lot more detail. There's so much content to this one as well, so it's quite overwhelming when you first look at Dominion and you see these stacks and stacks of boxes that people have with all these expansions. But yeah, I was quite impressed with Dominion, enjoyed that one a lot. The other games that we played at the Board Game Cafe were Flashpoint Fire Rescue. This is one that I was just interested to sort of see this one and how this felt, because this is a lighter co-op experience, and it's just one that I had never actually seen being played and I never really hear people talk about, and so I just wanted to see where it stood in the co-op universe, because sometimes I feel that co-op games can really feel samey, like a very much like a pick up and deliver system that doesn't really do anything different. Flashpoint, I do sort of, we only played it for a short amount of time. We actually won our scenario from what I could see. We did strip it back to just be most of the base game rules. I don't really feel like it was doing anything different. It was quite an approachable game. I think some of the rules were a little bit overly complicated for the game it was trying to be. So you've got like explosions that can take place and they go off in different directions and damage the walls and ignite like smoke patches and things like that. And so I'm not sure it's like a really super approachable game if you're playing with family and younger children, unless you're the one controlling all of those aspects. But overall, it was an absolutely fine experience. I'm glad that I have played it. So now I know that it's not one that I want in my collection or anything like that, but I have experienced that and know that it's not really doing anything new or that interesting compared to some other games that are out there. The other one that we played, we only managed to play 3, and this one was we didn't finish the game. It was a really quick, like, just set it up and see how it plays because we were running out of time. This is Gloom, which is a card game which has transparent cards. You are playing cards from your hand, these transparent cards, onto family members that are in front of you or in front of your opponent to try and make them, it's the opposite way around to what you think. I think you're trying to make them as happy as possible because the ultimate aim of the game is to be the person with the most miserable people. So you're trying to play really positive cards on your opponent's family members, but really negative cards on your own family members. But these can layer up. So even if you do some sort of like big tragedy on one of your family members, so it could be things like, I don't know, I can't even think of it. I didn't play it long enough to really sort of grasp all of the theme here, but there's really horrendous things that are happening to these people, like they get the plague or something like that. So your family member is really darn miserable right now because they're feeling very sick. But then the other person is going to be playing a card on top of that one which may offset that negative event and give you a positive outlook instead. And so you're trying to battle back and forth with those sorts of ideas, at the same time creating more and more obscure stories with it. Didn't play this one enough to really get a really good feel of it, but from very initial quick impressions, this seems like quite a good time, much down my street of the thematics of like a bit obscure and macabre humour type. And the components are really nice as well because you've got all of the really cool artwork and some flavour text, which is quite amusing, but they're all transparent, so that was really cool. So that was a really fun time, and I would really like to play Gloom properly and just to sort of get a better feel of that one because it does seem like quite an interesting game. And the other plays, just to sort of finish off, are ones that I have spoken about many a time on the channel, so I won't go into them. I played Keystone North America, of course, one of my favourites, just walked the once, over 14 minutes. Played a 2-player game of Fungi. I have spoken about that one before solo. Haven't got it back out again solo yet, but we had a 2-player game of that one over half an hour. And of course, Ganstream Clever as well, I played once for 19 minutes. And that is everything that I played in November. So that was all 15 different games. Oh, wow. So December is going to be interesting because I've still got Stardew Valley out at the moment. I've got a couple of other games that I need to get out for reviews as well. And because I've pre-filmed a couple of things, so hopefully I will get them out, and that will allow me to have some bigger games on the table that will hopefully stay there for a bit, and I can talk about them in December as well as going through my most played games. So that is everything that I played in the month of November. As I said, join me next month as well, and we will have a little bit of a yearly recap as to some of my favourite games of the year, my top played games of the year, as well as anything new that I have got out on the table for December. I'm not sure when that video will be out because I'm not home over Christmas, so hopefully I will get that one filmed very early in the new year once I have managed to finish my 365 days of gaming. But I don't know when it'll be out. Hopefully ASAP in the new year, but stay tuned for that one. That'll be a good time. So thank you very much for joining me today. Let me know down below any favourite games that you have been playing in the month of November. If you did enjoy this one today, please consider subscribing to the channel and you will be let know of any future releases that I do. Otherwise, have a lovely rest of your day and I will see you on the next one. Bye bye!